Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for session number 6 in my One Flower 8 Ways. Today I'm coloring with the Kuretake Gansai Tambi watercolors. I have the 36 count set. It also comes in 12, 18, and 24. You can see I have all these nice palettes in a plastic holder. And I always use my paper piercer to get the first one up. But once you get it up, you can see how nice these little containers are. You can kind of take them to your work surface, use them, and put them back. The lid contains a place to put samples of all the colors, which you'll need because you can see that the palettes themselves really don't indicate the color. Now, none of these have color names. They're all numbers. They have Japanese names, I think. I'm not sure, but it's all Japanese except for the numbers, so that's how I go by the colors. This set also contained, which is kind of different about it, there is white, there's silver, gold, and then also kind of a coppery gold. So it's kind of nice to have these other options in the pack. I think these paints are a little bit harder to work with than some of the other mediums I've been using when you're trying to color a smaller area. For doing washes, I think they're really easy, but when you're trying to get kind of a realistic dimensional look to your image, it's a little bit more difficult, but I'm going to give you some tips on how to get good results on that. These are much more opaque, so they kind of go on more like paint, like traditional acrylic paint, than watercolor. And the more you use, the thicker it is and the darker and more vibrant the color gets. So I'm going to be coloring the same image from Altenew, Persian Motifs. I've got my Strathmore watercolor paper, 90 pound. It's a little bit of an off-white color. And when I do watercolor, I always clear emboss over some VersaFine black onyx ink, and that helps me stay in the lines with my water. So let's get started. All right, a few things you'll need. A very large, you can see my mason jar here, jar of water. These colors are full of pigment and you really need a lot of water to get the color off in between. I'm also using a tissue off to the side that I'm going to use to wipe off my brush when I don't want to get more water, but I want to remove some of the color. And I'm also using a very fine brush, you can see. When applying these watercolors, they can get a little bit out of control, so that's why I want to use as thin of a brush as I can. This is Low Cornell 7000 round number 00. So that's kind of my big tip for today in using these watercolors in a small area, is to use a very, very fine brush. The first thing I'm going to do is wet my brush. I know my water's off camera here. And then I'm going to grab some color. I'm going to use this yellow. This is number 43. Yes, and this one's 31. So I'm going to grab some yellow. And again, one petal at a time. You can see how bright this yellow is. And because my brush is so small, it really doesn't pick up that much water, which is nice. So I'm going to go all the way here. I'm going to have to grab a little bit more. In fact, I think I need even a little bit more water. Well, hold on. Okay, so I'm going to cover the whole thing. All right, so I'm going to get some more water because I always have to start my palette with some water. I'm moving on to the orange now. So I'm going to grab some. I want to make sure I don't get too much water. That's going to be the key, because if I drop in orange with a lot of water, it's going to immediately spread quickly into this yellow. So I'm just going to kind of dab it in here on the dry areas to make sure I don't have too much. And then I'm going to start. You can see I don't have very much water. It's almost going on like an acrylic paint. So I'm going to color my shadow areas. I'm doing the same thing as I did on the other pieces that I've done as far as where the shadows go. Down here. And then I'm going to grab some, put it right in there where my petal kind of rounds over. So I'm going to grab some more. I'm going to rinse the brush out, actually. And I don't want too much water, but I'm going to blend it. So I'm going to take some of the water off all my tissue. And then I'm going to kind of go over this line here. And you can see where it starts to blend out. But because I don't have too much water, it's not blending too far out. I'm going to go just kind of get rid of that harsh line. And these watercolors are actually kind of forgiving in that you can remove water. They're not totally permanent. You will get some residual color. Here, I'm going to rinse or dry that off a little bit. But if you make a mistake, you can wet it and it'll take the color off. A little bit more water, take some off. And then I have kind of another line here, so I'm going to blend that out. And it really is just kind of a going back and forth until you get the blend that you want. I think I'm going to stop there. So that's petal number 1. All right, I'm going to do another one here. So I've dried off my brush. I'm going to get some more water. get some of the yellow. And I like to cover the whole thing with yellow first. And that way I know I have color in all the areas, all the lightest color. And I'm running out of water here, as you can see. So you don't want too much water, and it'll dry quickly. But it's okay, as I said, that the color can actually be mixed back in after it's dried a little bit, which some of the other ones won't do. So I've dipped my brush now, and I'm going to actually take a little bit of water off. Again, I just don't want that much water. And I'll pick some up here, and then I'm going to paint it in my shadow areas. I typically do not use this watercolor. See, I don't have enough water. So it's a nice little balance you have to kind of figure out. I usually don't use these watercolors for detail like this because they are kind of hard to control. It's much easier to just use a marker and spread it out the way you want it. So I typically use these watercolors for backgrounds and washes and things like that, or something that doesn't need really a lot of perspective. You just kind of want it to be a watercolory look. Put a little bit up here. All right, so those are my shadow areas. Oh, actually a little bit back here too. All right, I'm gonna get some water, just rinse, and then I'm gonna dab it here on the tissue, because you can always add more water. I'm just kind of going over the line between the yellow and the orange. And then since I have a lot of orange on my brush, I wanna take it off on my tissue. Grab a little bit more water, dab. So you can see this takes more time, more concentration. You want to really preserve that yellow. Although if you did get orange in the yellow, you could theoretically, it does come off pretty well. So you could kind of blank the area out with some water and start over. Grabbing a little bit more water, dab. Pull it out. So this is for somebody who kind of wants a challenge, I think. If you're trying to do something quick, I wouldn't use this medium. And I'm just trying to get rid of all my harsh lines. And I didn't really touch that orange area here very much. There. It really does look beautiful when you're done, as you can see. All right, let me do one more. I'm going to do this back one right here. Grab some yellow, pop it in there. Now it's funny, oh, I have a piece of hair in there. Okay. It's funny how when it comes to small areas like this, it seems to blend pretty quickly, but when you have it in a very large area, I would say that these colors don't blend as much as some of the other ones. You kind of have to force the blending when you're doing a background. I guess it all just really depends on how much water you use. So if you can thin these out quite a bit, get a much lighter color when you have more water. So you can see how bright this orange is, and that's because I really don't have much water. Okay. Rinsing, getting some water, dabbing, and then I'm going to work on those lines. And as soon as I get too far into the yellow with my orange, I'm going to stop. You can see where it's starting to blend a little bit too much into that yellow, and I'm going to wipe my brush and then go back in. Wipe and go back in. See, you can tell that my orange is kind of coming in there. I've got a lot of water here, so I'm going to kind of push a little bit out. Because these colors aren't quite so permanent, you can remove, so you can see I'm pushing the orange off the yellow. And then I can go back in and add a little bit more yellow if I want. All right, and work on the other side, grabbing a little bit of water, dabbing, and just being really careful. And I've got a lot of orange on my brush, so I'm going to wipe it off. Go back in, wipe. There. Oh, see, I got orange right there. So I'm going to take my tissue and just kind of touch it, and it'll remove a lot of that color. In fact, if I put a little bit of water even on my tissue and touch it, it'll remove even more water. Or color. So now I've sort of erased some of it, and I want to put some back. So I'm gonna dab so I don't have too much water, grab some of this orange, paint it back in. And then I think I want to add a little bit more yellow. My yellow got a little muted. So I'm gonna grab some of that again. Drop some of that in. I think I'm going to leave it at that. It's really hard to know when to stop. You could just keep working and working and working, and then eventually your paper will start to fill up. Okay, so I added a little bit more water. You can see how it kind of diluted that orange and made it a little bit more even in there. And you can see how it's drying. You've got a little bit of water stain here, a little water stain here. You could go back and fix that, but once you add water, it's going to dilute the color a little bit. So I'm not sure I want to do that. I'm just going to leave it and move on. So I'm going to finish these. I'll fast forward it, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, I'm going to come back for just a second here. You can see I've got so much orange here that I know that once I start blending it out, it's going to be a little bit too much. So I'm just going to grab some water, just plain water, and I'm going to kind of drop some water in there. You can see it's all starting to run together, and then I'm just going to dab it with my tissue, and you can see most of the color has come off along with the water. So I can kind of, not totally start over, but for the most part, start over with some of the color application. So I'm going to speed this up again. Here are all the petals finished. I love the vibrancy of it. It is definitely different. It's not as smooth of a blend. It's got some water lines in it. It's got some imperfections. That's just the style of this type of watercolor. And again, I would generally not use this paint to do these small areas, but I do like the way it came out. So let's start working on the leaves. I have 51 and 56, two different colors of green. I'm going to use the same technique I used on the petals, which is to use very little water. I'm going to start with my lightest color, and when you don't have a lot of water, it really is very, very thick paint. So you can see where I don't have much water because it's kind of going over the cardstock and creating some light areas. Okay, so I'm going to see how there's not that much water. I'm going to grab some water, just plain water, dab a little bit, and then to lighten it up a little bit, I'm going to start in my light area and kind of work my way into the paint and draw it out a little bit more rather than trying to cover the whole thing and get this medium kind of green all over. So that way I have a little bit of an area up here where the light hits. Get some more water, and then I'm going to pull maybe a little bit more color out and cover that area. Remember, this is just one color, so you can get a lot of variation with just one color. All right, I think that's good. Grab some water, and now I'm going to pull some of this. Ooh, a whole bunch of water came down my brush, so I'm going to be really careful. This is a very, very dark green, so I'm going to go to some of the drier areas of the palette to get some of that water off and get some dark color. I tested here. Actually, that's not very much water at all. Okay. carefully, I'm going to drop some. When you first drop it in there, you'll know if you have too much water because it'll start to spread quickly. And this is not spreading, so I've got a good amount of water. I'm going to pull it up a little bit, same as I did with the other mediums. Up the side here, just kind of a darker shadow, and then maybe up the middle a little bit. And a little color goes a long way. Pull that up the side a little bit more. Okay, now that I've got my color down, I'm just going to kind of blend it with some water. So I'm rinsing off my brush, dabbing it to make sure I don't have too much water. In fact, I'm not sure I'm going to have it. Oh yeah, that's good. So, and you can see that the water also takes color away. So you have to be careful. Again, this is kind of a trial and error medium for me anyway. So you kind of have to go back and forth with the water, the amount of water, where you're coloring it, pulling the color out. But you can get a really nice, pretty look here. Wipe that because I have too much green. All right, I'm going to leave it, well, that one little line right there. If you're a perfectionist, this is really hard. Okay, so I'm going to leave it just like that. And now I'm going to color the rest of these the same exact way, and then I'll be back for the leaves. Now I'm going to stop here for just a second. You can see how I colored this whole thing with this green, and this one has kind of lighter green in it because I used more water. So I'm just going to drop a little bit of water, not much, and you can see how it'll take some of the color away and how it'll make it lighter. So the nice thing about these watercolors is that you can kind of go back and fix mistakes. Once you put the color down, you don't have to worry about it being permanent, even if it dries. I don't know if this brand says it's permanent when it dries. I tried to find that online and I couldn't. But for me, experience-wise, tells me that it's not really that permanent. You can fix mistakes. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and fast forward again. The reason why I just blotted that is because I felt like I did too much green. So I'm going to go back and do that again. Okay, I forgot to turn the camera on, but all I did was I took the lighter green and I just did an all over color on this this leaf here. And what I did say when I first got on camera is this leaf is going to be hard because it's got a lot of little lines in it, it's got veins in it, and I'm a little nervous because the area is so small where I need to put these shadows in. But anyway, so I did an all over color, and I did actually use a little bit more water here because the area was a little bit bigger and I felt it wasn't spreading easily. So now I'm going to go back in with my darker color here. I'm going to be really careful because this dark is really super dark, and maybe I should have used a little bit of a lighter green, but I really wanted a lot of contrast. So I got a fresh tissue because my other tissue was just getting too soft and it just had too much color on it. So alright, so here we go. So I'm going to kind of do the base here, the same exact thing I did on the other ones. And because I have this fine tip, it does make it a lot easier to just get into those small areas. So I'm going around this little stem thing here that's coming through, or coming across my leaf. And then I'm going to go up some of these veins and I'm going to color the base right here against this thing here. And grab some more color when I need it. And just come down a little bit. And then I also want to have some shadow on the edges here. Being really careful to keep myself in the lines. This is very dark color. Just on this side, not on the other, not on the curves this way, just the curves this way. Okay. It's getting a little dry. Okay. I'm actually going to get a little bit more water because I'm having a hard time getting the color down. And grab some, and then I think I'm going to put a little bit of a dot here and a little one here. Maybe a little bit more down at the base here. Okay. Beware of the rolling water coming down your brush. You don't want that to hit your work. All right, rinse my brush thoroughly, dab off some of the water, and then I'm going to start going in there and blending my harsh lines. And then every time I get too much green on my brush, I'm going to wipe it off on my tissue here. And I think the first step is to get rid of the harsh lines, and then you can go back in and add more color where it's needed. But step one is, for me, always I go in and I get rid of the line where I drew in my color. And you can pull it out a little bit while you're there. Get a little bit more water, dab, and then pull it in. Just going to touch these lines. I think I might actually just stop right here because I'm worried. It doesn't have as much light on it, so maybe I won't stop. I'm going to grab some water and I'm just going to take away some of this color right here and add just a little bit of light coming in as a reflection. See, I'm just kind of brushing in some water, and that removes the color. And I'm doing it kind of at the top of these curves. That actually looks pretty good. Okay. Sometimes I surprise myself. All right, let's see. A little bit here maybe. And I'm not sure I'm going to do any more because down here you're still going to get shadow. I still haven't colored that one area right here. I really want to be careful. I don't want that to be too dark. I'm just going to grab a little bit of dark color. I'm going to put it right at the bottom line, a little bit down the stem. Grab some water, dab, and then blend. And I think I will go in and take a little bit of color out of the top of that. So I'm going to wet my brush, dab, and then just kind of brush it a little bit right there where the light might hit it, right on the curve. Looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to do this one and I'll be right back. For the stem, I'm just going to kind of fill in with this lighter green and play it by ear, I think, and then I might drop some of that darker color in. Right now I've got that covered. I'm just going to add a little bit of the dark. I'm going to be really careful. So I'm just going to put it in my shadow areas, which is right over here. I'm going to have a little shadow where this meets. You can see there's a lot of water on my brush. I'm going to dab that off. And then it soaked it up. Okay, so let's try that again. Get a little bit of dark and apply it right in my shadow areas. Now that I've dropped all of those dark colors in, I'm just going to go in. See, even when I wash my brush, there's still green on it because it's so vibrant. Okay, and then I'm just going to go and kind of try to blend a little bit of that together without creating one color across the whole stem, which is really hard to do because my area is so small. All right, I'm going to call it done. I think it's pretty good. I like the vibrancy of the color. A lot of these are all pretty vibrant. So let me wipe this up and I'll compare some of the other ones. So here we have the Gansai Tambi. Here's the Peerless watercolor. There's more variation in the Gansai. Here's the Copic. It's got a much more softer, smoother blend versus especially these two next to each other. You can see one's a really soft blend and the other one is more of a harsh lines, but still got vibrant color. We have the Distress markers. which actually I really like that one a lot. There's a lot more brighter yellow in this one. Here's the dry Inktense pencils. These two, by the way, are on the same paper. This is Neenah Solar White paper. This is watercolor paper. I also, the outline is going to be a little darker on these because I heat embossed them, versus this is just stamped with Memento. And then here is the wet Inktense pencils. So here you go. You can pause it and take a closer look at all these different versions. I'm not sure which one I like better. I definitely think that today's was much more difficult than the other ones. I think you have to have a little bit more patience to get the colors the way you want, and you might have to redo and redo to get it exactly the way you want it, especially if you're more of a perfectionist. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time for session 7.